Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Dare to Lead. I'm your host, Natalie Iglesias. In today's episode, we are going to share with you some questions asked to Mr. Ivan Caballero. He is the co founder of the Put Your Mind to Use Foundation that talks about the usefulness of the study of psychology in the managerial work and some interesting cognitive biases we can encounter in ourselves and others. So grab a pen and paper and take some notes because this is going to get very interesting. So to get the evening started, let me say welcome, Mr. Caballero. Thank you so much for joining us. So first question, in what organizations is psychology useful?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me share my thoughts with you all. So, to start with the question, psychology is always an important topic for every organization, no matter the type of these. As psychology is the scientific study of the minds and behavior, it is a science that has potential uses and applications in almost any activity where you can find human beings. Human beings are usually driven by both thoughts and feelings, with conscious and unconscious consequences. Also, psychology helps to better understand how these motivations generate determined behaviors in people. Human beings are not perfectly rational and mechanical machines. Rather than that, they are usually prone to both irrational and highly creative behaviors that affect such organizations.
Wow, very interesting. I had no idea about this. So to follow this up, how can a manager use psychology in their organizations?
Well, that's a great question. So psychology is a useful tool for managers as it helps them to better understand the motivations and actions of the people they lead. Even though human beings are instinctively diverse and sometimes unpredictable individuals, it is also true that when you analyze humans as a group, their group behavior tends to show clear and sometimes predictable patterns. You can find several useful, predictable patterns in your employees, customers, suppliers, governmental institutions, and so on. So, these predictable and repetitive patterns can help managers to make better decisions by understanding the triggers of the behaviors of people while reacting in the best interest of the organizations they manage.
So since managers can predict the behaviors, what kind of predictions can we derive from psychology in order to enhance the performance of managers?
Okay, so for example, it is important for managers to understand how the cognitive biases work in the minds of people. Managers should avoid these biases as much as possible to improve their decision making. Managers can also learn to spot these mental biases once they are analyzing the behavior of the people who surround them.
Can we expand on this, please? Can you give us some examples to all our listeners about these cognitive biases?
Yeah, of course. There are many different types of cognitive biases, but I will explain some of the most interesting ones. Here I will describe some of them. So the first one would be action bias, the tendency for someone to act when faced with a problem, even when inaction would be more efficient, or to act when no evident problem exists. The second one is additive bias, the tendency to solve problems through addition, even when subtraction is a better approach. The third one would be attribute substitution, occurs when a judgment has to be made that is computationally complex, and instead of a more easily calculated heuristic attribute is attributed. This, this substitution is thought of as taking place in the automatic and intuitive judgment system rather than the more self-aware reflective system. The fourth one is curse of knowledge. When better informed, people find it extremely difficult to think about problems from the perspective of a lesser informed people. Declinism is the fifth one. It is basically the predisposition to view the past favorably and future negatively. The sixth one is end of history illusion. The age independent belief that one will change less in the future than one has in the past. Exaggerated expectation is the seventh one. This means the tendency to expect or predict more extreme outcomes than those outcomes that actually happen. So we go to the eighth with form function attribution bias. In the human robot interaction, the tendency of people to make systematic errors when interacting with a robot. People may base their expectations and perceptions of a robot on its appearance and the attribute functions which do not necessarily mirror the true functions of the robot. The ninth is the hindsight bias, sometimes called the I knew it all along effect, the tendency to see past events as being predictable before they happen. The tenth one would be impact bias, the tendency to overestimate the length or the intensity of the impact of future feeling states. The 11th one, and I hope all of you are following me, is the information bias, the tendency to seek information even when it cannot affect action. The 12th is the introspective bias or hungry judge effect, the tendency for sensory input about the body itself to affect one's judgment about external, unrelated circumstances. The 13th one is the money illusion, the tendency to concentrate on the nominal value of money rather than its value in terms of purchasing power. 14th would be the moral credential effect. Occurs when someone who does something good gives themselves permission to be less good in the future. The 15th one is the non adaptive choice switching. After experiencing a bad outcome with a decision problem, the tendency to avoid the choice previously made when faced with the same decision problem again, even though the choice was optimal, also known as the once bitten, twice shy or hot stove effect. The 16th one is the mere exposure effect or familiarity principle. In social psychology, the tendency to express undue likings for things merely based of familiarity with them. There are many more, but I want to wrap up with that so we can pass on to the next question.
Thank you, Ivan. I think all our listeners are interested in this conversation, and I think they've learned everything, and we have all of the points we needed to get for tonight. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So what we get from this, it is very clear that psychology is interesting and a very extensive topic. So we would love you to have you on one of our next episodes. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Natalie. It was such a pleasure to be on this podcast.
Such a pleasure as well. Have a great night.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.